Hello, and welcome to a new series I like to call Dissenting Opinion, where I essentially take the opposite viewpoint of everyone else in the world to get yelled at a bunch. Today I'm going to be analyzing the core character differences between the characters Solid Snake and Raiden from the Metal Gear series, and try to find out why exactly people feel so differently about them. Before I get too far into this, I'd like to give a bit of background on this controversy to help sum up exactly why I think this is important enough to talk about. The year is 1998, and Metal Gear Solid is finally released for the original PlayStation console. It stars Solid Snake, a powerful and super smart Ultra Soldier who is tasked with defeating the members of his old unit Foxhound before they can utilize Metal Gear Rex, a giant bipedal tank, and use it to begin a nuclear holocaust. Snake, while written a step above your typical Stallone, Schwarzenegger, or whoever action hero archetype, fits a typical young man's ideal hero quite well. As we learn throughout the events of the first game, Snake is literally made to be perfect, a genetic copy of Big Boss, the world's greatest soldier. He's strong, athletic, possesses charm and good looks, and has an IQ of 180, and is fluent in 6 different languages. People loved Solid Snake and wanted to see more. So it wasn't a big surprise when a sequel, Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty, was announced for the upcoming PlayStation 2 console. Early trailers for Metal Gear Solid 2 showcased Snake on board a ship, hunting down a new kind of Metal Gear. All of the best aspects of the last game have become even better due to the new hardware, and people were crazy excited to play as Snake on PlayStation 2. And when the game finally released, fans got exactly that, for about an hour or two. After the events on the tanker, the game takes an unexpected turn and puts the player in control of a new character named Raiden. Raiden was, in virtually every way that players care for, the exact opposite of Solid Snake. Here's an image detailing exactly how different these two guys are physically. Solid Snake possesses a large physique, has dark hair, he wears a bulky sneaking suit, he's gruff-voiced and masculine. By comparison, Raiden is smaller, has a lithe frame, has light-colored skin and hair, wears a skin-tight skull suit, he's soft-voiced, and kind of feminine. Even the way in which they interacted with other characters was wildly different. Solid Snake tended to be no-nonsense, efficient, flirty towards women, and sociable towards everyone else, especially his best bro, Otacon. Raiden's only notable positive relationship at the start of MGS2 is his girlfriend Rose, with whom he either bickered or reminisced with constantly throughout the game. He was somewhat nerdy.
There's a terminal in front of the elevator, a node.
Did you say nerd?
Not nerd, node.
Oh.
And had arguments with Rose about typical geek stuff such as movies. I mean, in a contest between the two, what hot-blooded male would ever think Raiden was superior to Solid Snake?
You're the shit!
Well, I'm here to tell you that for all the traditional views towards what a man needs to be, Raiden beats out Snake in virtually every contest. For the sake of simplicity, I will be ignoring Metal Gear Solid 4 when comparing physical accomplishments, as the technological advancements utilized by both characters, Muscle Suit, Cyborg Ninja, make it a dumb argument since the power was not earned by either character in that game. Other than that, any canonical exploit by either person is acceptable in my comparison. Let's look at one of the simplest criteria: each character's physical feats. Both being government agent super spies, Raiden and Snake have a lot of huge accomplishments under their respective belts. I'll start with Snake. David began his career as a Green Beret, a member of the United States Army Special Forces, most notably participating in the Gulf War at 18. An unquestionably grueling and difficult standard, he regardless rose to the top and eventually joined Foxhound, which was led by Big Boss, his genetic father and the legendary soldier of the 20th century. After being betrayed by Big Boss, Solid Snake defeated him twice in combat, technically taking his title from him and establishing himself as the greatest soldier. After retiring for several years, he was again called to the front lines when he had to infiltrate Shadow Moses Island. There, he defeated the remainder of Foxhound, along with Liquid Snake, his brother and fellow clone of Big Boss. First while Liquid was piloting Metal Gear Rex, and again in a fistfight, proving his dominance over his genetic rivals. Years later, he helped form Philanthropy with Otacon, essentially being labeled as a terrorist by various world governments to help in preventing nuclear proliferation via the Metal Gear robots. Now on to Raiden, where things get a bit more interesting. Jack began his life as a warrior wildly different from Solid Snake. A child soldier during the Liberian Civil War, Raiden had to learn how to kill in a much less sterilized and safe environment from Solid Snake, and at a much younger age. Known as the White Devil due to his features and high kill count in the small boy unit under Solid Snake, Raiden eventually made it to the United States through a war relief center. I always laugh when Solid Snake unwittingly attacks Raiden for receiving training via virtual reality, when all the evidence points to Raiden having actually started as a soldier literally a third of the age of Solid Snake, and in an ethically reprehensible environment. As demonstrated by Ocelot near the end of MGS2, a large portion of the events of the plant chapter of the game end up being intentionally manufactured by the Big Brother S Patriots and their S3 plan to be an exact replica of the events of Shadow Moses. So that alone puts Raiden's exploits on par with Snake's when comparing the events of MGS1 with MGS2. While I believe that most of these feats are on equal terms, I'd like to point out one major difference between the two. The second to final boss of both games are fight against the Metal Gear robots. Solid Snake has to fight a single Metal Gear Rex unit, while Raiden has to fight between 3 and 24 Metal Gear Ray units, a more technically advanced machine. And to drive home the comparisons between the two, Raiden defeats Solid Snake, the third son of Big Boss, and Solid's genetic equal. While Raiden's exploits are fewer, which is something of a given as he only has one game that we can make a fair assessment of his skills off of, what feats he does have seem to beat out Solid Snake's. War began for Raiden when he was 6 years old. To put this into perspective, it is entirely possible that Raiden began war before Solid Snake did, by a maximum of 5 years. He is also shown to be more capable of defeating Metal Gears than Snake. Virtually every other one of their exploits puts them on equal footing, so for this round, it seems that Raiden is the better man. But in the end, that's not everything. After all, a lot of what people complain about concerning Raiden is not what he accomplishes, but how he does so. People call him whiny, a child of the virtual age. He's not nearly as charismatic as Snake, and he talks with his girlfriend too much, right? Wrong. Raiden's relationships with other people, despite having more bumps, tend to work out more in the long run. This is because he tries to hold things together. Let me explain. As I've stated before, Snake's somewhat flirty and seems to be a ladies' man on the same level as, say, James Bond. Despite this, he only has one main love interest worth noting in the series, Meryl Silverberg, with whom he seems to get together with during the end of Metal Gear Solid. This relationship quickly turns sour, however, as demonstrated in a codec call in Metal Gear Solid 2, in which Snake talks with Otacon.
She's not dead, is she?
No, just knocked out.
Good.
Looks like a little angel, doesn't she?
What's gotten into you?
Nothing.
Sleeping Beauty may have been awakened by Prince Charming's kiss, but you better not try it here.
I'm with you. Besides, I've had enough of tomboys.
The tomboy comment clearly directed at Meryl Silverberg. Upon their meeting again in Metal Gear Solid 4...
Listen, old man. I don't take orders from you or from your Colonel Campbell.
There seems to be a lot of awkwardness, if not outright hostility, on both of their parts. All of this indicating that the relationship ended on bad notes. While they are definitely on the same side and care about each other,
I may have loved you once, but now you're just too damn senile to face the truth. Wake up and face reality, old Snake.
words between them are not too kind when they disagree on how to deal with Liquid Ocelot. Let's compare this to Raiden and how his primary romantic attachment works out. Jack and Rose met on April 30th of 2007, with the Big Shell incident of MGS2 taking place 2 years later. A lot of what we know about their interactions are relayed to us through the codec calls between them.
Why, Jack? Why?
At first they seem to be a relatively normal couple, but things get very creepy very fast. In an emotionally charged outburst, Rose brings up how Jack has never slept beside her, even after they'd apparently made love. After she bursts into his room, believing him to be having an affair, he even gets physically violent with her. It is revealed that Raiden's room is empty except for a single bed and a desk. All of this is a result of Raiden's PTSD from being a child soldier. Raiden and Rose's relationship, when compared with Snake's and Meryl's, brings up an interesting question. Why does one seem so dysfunctional yet ultimately succeeds, while the other is relatively normal yet falls apart? Both Snake and Raiden are haunted by their past and the blood on their hands. Snake uses this as an opportunity to distance himself from others, while Raiden attempts to keep the few people he cares about close to him, even if he utilizes often problematic methods to do so. He's more willing to talk through his problems, even if he initially runs away from them, and this makes him far more capable of dealing with the ups and downs of a relationship than Snake. And to look at Snake and Raiden's sexuality in a more basic light, do I even need to bring up the fact that Snake is sterile? I mean, what gets more traditionally male than sexual virility? Raiden has a son by Rose as shown at the end of MGS4, which is at least proof of sexual exploits, while Snake hits on women sometimes. Raiden has a family that he loves and can protect, while Snake is set up to die old and virtually alone, with only his best friend and their adoptive daughter as company. Oh, and his old love interest marries that guy with diarrhea that got knocked out by them in the first game. Ouch. To summarize, Raiden proves himself over and over again to be Solid Snake's equal, if not superior, in combat and physical exploits, has had higher hurdles to jump and heavier burdens to carry, and yet manages to hold on to a working family, if just barely. But the question still remains, why exactly does everyone prefer Snake? My conclusion is, very simply put, that he looks and sounds the part. Audiences are far too eager to jump onto the gruff, muscular characters versus the effeminate pretty boy, and a largely male audience doesn't care as much for romantic subplots outside of flirting and fan service, which Meryl offers more of when compared to Rose. Agree? Disagree? I'd love to hear your opinions. I'd like to turn Dissenting Opinion and other similar geek culture videos into a larger thing, but mostly I'd love to see some discussion going on in the comment sections, or wherever you think is appropriate.